Have you ever noticed that the moment you start walking away from people, the whole world suddenly becomes quieter, but your soul becomes louder? It's almost like life has been waiting for you to stop depending on the wrong people so it can finally show you who you really are. The truth is simple. The version of you that needs others to feel whole will never discover its full power. But the version of you that learns to move alone, that version becomes unstoppable. Because the moment you no longer need anyone to complete you, you finally meet the real you. 1. Walking alone brings you back to who you really are. Most people spend their entire lives wearing masks they never chose, following rules they never questioned, and living inside versions of themselves shaped by the expectations of others. From childhood, you are told who you should be, how you should act, what you should want, and who you must become to be accepted. You grow up hearing opinions louder than your own thoughts. You absorb judgments before you even understand yourself. You begin comparing your journey to people who don't even know your pain, and slowly, without noticing it, the world directs your life more than your inner truth does. This external noise becomes so constant that many people never get the chance to meet their real selves. They mistake their environment for identity, their relationships for purpose, and the approval of others for inner peace. Walking alone interrupts this entire cycle. It is like stepping out of a crowded, noisy market and entering a quiet forest where the only voice you can hear is your own. Suddenly, something subtle but powerful begins to shift inside you. You step out of the identity that others built around you, and for the first time, you start breathing as your true self instead of a role you've been forced to play. Solitude gives you space from opinions that were suffocating your truth, space from expectations that were weighing down your spirit, and space from judgments that made you doubt your worth. This space becomes the doorway through which you reconnect with the parts of yourself that were buried under years of pressure and noise. When you walk alone, you rediscover your own desires without the influence of what others want for you. You start recognizing what genuinely matters, not what impressed people, not what pleased others, not what gained approval, but what actually aligns with your heart. You begin to hear the soft whispers of your intuition that were drowned out by the chaos of the world. Maybe you realize that the goals you were chasing were not yours. Maybe you see that the life you were building wasn't designed by your soul, but by the fears, expectations, or wishes of others. Solitude helps you untangle your truth from the voices that have been controlling your direction for years. In Buddhism, solitude is not a punishment, it is a return to presence, a return to clarity, and most importantly, a return to yourself. When you choose to walk alone, you are not isolating yourself from the world. You are reconnecting with the core of who you are beneath every label, every expectation, and every influence. You stop running from yourself and learn to sit with your thoughts, your emotions, and your experiences without judgment. And in that stillness, you begin to understand your strengths, your wounds, your potential, and your purpose with a level of honesty that no one else can give you. People often fear being alone because they think solitude is emptiness. But in reality, solitude is fullness. Fullness of awareness, fullness of clarity, fullness of understanding. When you are finally alone, without distractions, without noise, without crowds, your inner voice becomes clearer. You start recognizing which parts of your life truly belong to you and which parts were borrowed from others. You begin to understand that your confusion never came from a lack of ability. It came from trying to be everything for everyone except yourself. Every moment you walk alone is a moment you walk closer to your real identity. Walking alone is the first step toward authenticity because you cannot find yourself while being surrounded by people who keep telling you who to be. You need silence to hear your truth and distance to see your path clearly. The journey back to yourself cannot happen in a crowd. It happens in the quiet space you create when you choose solitude with courage and intention. Walking alone is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of the version of you that is real, grounded, free, and finally aligned with your true purpose. 2. Solitude forces you to build emotional independence. Emotional independence is one of the rarest strengths in the world, not because people lack the ability to develop it, but because they have spent most of their lives depending on others to feel worthy, loved, understood, or complete. From a young age, you are taught, often without words, that your emotions must be supported by someone else. You look to parents for comfort, friends for validation, teachers for approval, partners for reassurance, and society for acceptance. Slowly, you begin to believe that your emotional stability depends on someone else's presence, someone else's attention, or someone else's approval. This is why so many people feel lost when relationships end, devastated when someone pulls away, or broken when they face disappointment. Their peace was never theirs, it was borrowed. Walking alone changes this from the ground up. When you are alone, you no longer have a constant emotional crutch. No one is there to validate your feelings instantly. No one is there to comfort your fears on demand. And no one is there to fill the empty spaces within you. At first, this feels uncomfortable, even painful, because you are forced to sit with emotions you once avoided by leaning on others. But this discomfort is exactly where emotional independence is born. When there is no one left to depend on, you begin turning inward. You start learning how to comfort yourself instead of seeking comfort from others. You start learning how to calm your own storms instead of expecting someone to come fix them. You begin realizing that your emotions are not impossible to manage. You just never learned how, because someone else was always doing the emotional work for you. Buddhism teaches that suffering comes from attachment, clinging to people as if their presence is the only source of inner peace. But the truth is, when your stability depends on someone else, your life becomes fragile. One argument can break you. One rejection can destroy your confidence. One moment of silence can create fear. One person's change of heart can shatter your entire sense of self. You become emotionally controlled by forces outside your control. This is the root of insecurity, anxiety, and emotional weakness. Solitude reverses this completely. When you walk alone, day after day, you begin to see that you can survive feelings you thought would break you. You see that your sadness doesn't last forever. You see that your fears slowly fade when you face them, instead of hiding behind someone else's strength. You see that you are capable of healing without needing someone to save you. This realization is powerful. It is the moment you stop fearing abandonment, because you understand you were never truly abandoned. You were simply returned to yourself. Over time, something profound happens. You stop expecting others to fill your emptiness because you begin to fill it yourself. You stop chasing validation because you learn how to validate your own worth. You stop giving people the power to control your emotional state because you learn how to regulate your own mind. You become your own safe space, your own source of peace, your own emotional shelter. You learn the art of sitting with your feelings without running from them, suppressing them, or outsourcing them. Instead of depending on someone else to make you feel better, you develop the strength to hold your emotional weight with dignity and patience. Eventually, emotional independence becomes your natural state. You walk through life differently. People's opinions don't shake you as easily because your identity is no longer built on pleasing them. Their absence doesn't terrify you because your happiness doesn't depend on their presence. Their rejection doesn't define you because you no longer attach your value to their acceptance. You learn that the most secure feeling in the world is not being loved by others. It is knowing that even if nobody stands beside you, you will still stand strong. This is the freedom solitude gives you. It teaches you that you do not need someone else to feel complete. You need clarity. You need presence. You need self-understanding. You need the courage to face yourself without fear. And once you master this inner independence, you stop attracting relationships built on neediness and insecurity. You begin attracting relationships built on respect, wholeness, and real emotional maturity. 3. Being alone filters out the wrong people automatically. One of the most liberating truths you discover when you begin to walk alone is that solitude quietly and naturally filters people without you having to say a single word. In life, you are often surrounded by individuals who claim to care, but their presence is based on convenience, not connection. They stay close when they need something, when they want reassurance, when you are useful, or when your presence gives them comfort. But very few stay because they truly value you at a soul level. Most people misunderstand solitude and think it pushes people away. But in reality, solitude does something far more powerful. It reveals who was never meant to stay in your life in the first place. When you choose to walk alone, you stop chasing people. You stop giving more than you receive. You stop forcing relationships. You stop adjusting yourself to fit into spaces that drain your spirit. When that happens, the people who were only connected to the weaker, confused, people-pleasing version of you slowly fall away. They were not attached to you, they were attached to the version of you that made their life easier. Once you stop giving them endless attention, emotional energy, or validation, they disappear. It may feel painful at first, but this is not loss. This is purification. Buddhism teaches that attachment creates suffering, but so does the wrong company. When you surround yourself with people who drain you, discourage you, or distract you from your purpose, your spirit becomes restless, your mind becomes clouded, your direction becomes confused. Walking alone removes these hidden weights from your shoulders. You begin noticing that those who truly care make an effort even when you are silent. They reach out without expecting something back. They value your presence, your growth, and your peace, not just the comfort you provide them. Solitude exposes the ones who were pretending. When you stop being constantly available, the people who were using you become irritated or distant. When you stop sharing every detail of your life, the ones who fed on your openness lose interest. When you stop allowing others to drain your energy, the energy vampires naturally fade away. This is not a coincidence. It is a natural spiritual sorting. Your silence becomes a test. Your absence becomes a filter. Your distance becomes the truth serum, and the truth reveals itself clearly. The ones who care will stay. The ones who don't will vanish. People often think they are losing friends when they start walking alone, but the reality is they are losing illusions. They are losing the people who smiled at their face but quietly hoped they would fail. They are losing those who praised their growth publicly but envied it privately. They are losing those who kept them small, insecure, and emotionally dependent because that made them easier to control. Solitude removes these shadows from your life and leaves you with a circle that is smaller, but far more meaningful. And something beautiful happens when you walk alone long enough. The right people begin to appear naturally. People who respect your boundaries instead of testing them. People who value your presence instead of taking it for granted. People who admire your growth instead of feeling threatened by it. People who bring peace, not chaos. Clarity, not confusion. Effort, not excuses. You stop attracting connections built on fear, insecurity, and emotional neediness. You begin attracting people whose souls resonate with your strength and your sincerity. Walking alone also teaches you that not everyone is meant to accompany you into the next chapter of your life. Some people belong to earlier versions of you. Some friendships were lessons, not lifetimes. Some relationships were reminders, not destinies. And some people were simply stepping stones that guided you toward a deeper understanding of yourself. When you try to hold on to those who were meant to leave, you block the path for those who are meant to arrive. In truth, solitude is not the cause of losing people. It is the cure for keeping the wrong ones. When you stop chasing, forcing, and clinging, you give life permission to remove what was never stable. This creates space, beautiful, necessary space for people who match your energy, your values, and your purpose. And this is the quiet miracle of walking alone. You do not have to judge, confront, or push anyone away. Life organizes your circle for you. Your silence does the sorting. Your growth does the cleansing. Your elevation does the separation. And the people who remain after this natural filtering process are the ones who will walk with you in truth, loyalty, and alignment. 4. When you walk alone, your mind becomes sharper and stronger. There is a kind of mental clarity that can only be discovered when you are no longer surrounded by constant noise, distractions, or draining people. Most individuals live their lives with their minds pulled in 100 different directions. Opinions from others, unspoken expectations, social obligations, emotional chaos, and the pressure to constantly keep up with the world. This constant external stimulation leaves the mind weak, unfocused, restless, and easily influenced. But when you begin to walk alone, something profound begins to happen internally. Your mind stops leaking energy into places that don't serve your growth, and it begins to gather itself again. When you choose solitude, you create a sacred space that protects your mental energy. You return to a slow, deliberate, and intentional way of thinking. Decisions become clearer because they are no longer influenced by what others will think or by the fear of disappointing people. You no longer feel pulled in multiple directions because your path becomes aligned with your own truth, not the noise of the world. Buddhism teaches that the mind naturally becomes sharper when you remove unnecessary attachments, because clarity is the default state of consciousness once distractions are gone. Walking alone forces you to face your thoughts without interruption, without someone constantly filling your mind with their opinions, without people pulling your attention toward drama, gossip, conflict, or emotional instability. You finally meet your mind in its raw, honest form. This can feel uncomfortable at first because you begin to see your fears, insecurities, desires, and hidden emotions with complete transparency. But this discomfort is necessary. It is the doorway to mental strength. When you stop running from your mind and instead begin to understand it, you take back control over your inner world. Your focus becomes sharper because solitude removes the background noise that was blurring your vision. Your intuition becomes louder because your inner voice is no longer competing with the voices of others. Your creativity expands because your mind finally has the silence it needs to imagine, explore, and understand deeper truths. Your decision-making becomes stronger because you no longer rely on external validation. You trust your insight, your reasoning, and your experience. Solitude is the training ground of mental warriors. It builds discipline because when you walk alone, you learn to rely on your own structure, your own habits, and your own consistency. You cannot depend on someone else to motivate you, remind you, or push you. You learn to do that yourself. This self-discipline becomes one of the greatest gifts of walking alone. You stop living reactively, bouncing between people's emotions, problems, and expectations, and start living intentionally with a focused mind and a stable inner foundation. Something else happens when you walk alone. Your perception deepens. You start seeing things that you never noticed when your life was crowded. You begin to understand people's intentions clearly because your judgment is not clouded by emotional dependency. You recognize which habits strengthen you and which habits weaken you. You notice your own thoughts without being overwhelmed by them. You become more self-aware, more observant, and more spiritually aligned. And with this clarity, your mental strength becomes unshakable. You are no longer easily manipulated because your mind is anchored in wisdom. You are no longer easily confused because your thoughts move with precision. You are no longer easily distracted because your focus is grounded in purpose. You begin to value silence not as emptiness, but as the sharpest tool for understanding yourself and the world. Buddhism teaches that a calm mind is a powerful mind, and solitude is the environment where calmness grows. In silence, your mind becomes like a still lake, reflecting truth with perfect clarity. In solitude, your mind becomes like a sharpened blade, cutting through illusions with ease. In absence of noise, your mind becomes like a well-lit path guiding you forward without confusion. When you walk alone long enough, you develop a mental strength that cannot be taken from you. You stop being reactive and start being reflective. You stop being easily influenced and start being deeply grounded. You stop being overwhelmed by life and start navigating it with clarity, precision, and inner peace. That is the strength. Solitude gives you strength, not born from aggression or force, but from silence, clarity, and self-understanding. 5. You stop begging for love and start giving it to yourself. One of the greatest transformations that happens when you walk alone is the shift from seeking love outward to cultivating love inward. Most people grow up believing that love must come from others, that it must be earned, received, or proven through someone else's approval. From childhood, you are conditioned to think that being loved makes you worthy, that being chosen makes you valuable, and that being accepted makes you complete. Without realizing it, you begin to depend on external affection to feel good about yourself. This dependence becomes a silent burden carried into adulthood. You start chasing people who don't choose you, holding on to those who don't value you, and keeping relationships that drain you because you fear losing the small fragments of love they offer. You begin begging emotionally, showing extra kindness to earn someone's attention, lowering your standards to keep someone close, or shaping yourself into a version that pleases others just so you won't be left alone. But the moment you begin walking alone, this entire pattern slowly breaks apart. When you spend time with yourself, without the constant emotional noise of relationships, you start seeing clearly how much of your life has been driven by the need to be loved externally. You realize how many times you have tolerated disrespect because you wanted to feel valued. You understand how many times you have allowed yourself to be mistreated because you feared being alone more than being unhappy. You begin to recognize the moments when you accepted less than you deserved because you were starving for emotional validation. Solitude exposes these wounds not to hurt you, but to help you heal them. In Buddhism, suffering arises from attachment, especially the attachment to being loved by others. When your happiness is tied to someone else's presence, mood, approval, or attention, you hand over control of your emotional world. Their silence wounds you, their distance scares you, their rejection shatters you. But walking alone teaches you that your emotional survival cannot depend on someone else's affection. You begin to understand that love received from others is unstable. It changes, it fades, it fluctuates, it disappoints. But love cultivated within yourself is steady, grounding, deep, and always available. As you walk alone longer, you begin learning how to give yourself the things you once begged others for. Instead of needing someone to validate you, you learn to appreciate yourself for your own efforts, your own progress, and your own uniqueness. Instead of needing someone to choose you, you learn to choose yourself, your peace, and your growth. Instead of craving someone else's presence to feel whole, you learn to enjoy your own company. Your relationship with yourself becomes stronger, healthier, and more respectful because solitude teaches you that you are not incomplete. You were simply unaligned. Self-love becomes less of a concept and more of a living experience. You begin to treat yourself with patience instead of criticism, compassion instead of judgment, and understanding instead of punishment. You stop demanding perfection from yourself and start embracing the human, evolving, learning version of who you are. You stop pressuring yourself to meet unrealistic standards of beauty, success, or acceptance. Instead, you honor your journey exactly as it is. You stop hiding your flaws out of shame and start acknowledging them with kindness. Real self-love is not about feeling great all the time. It is about accepting yourself even when you don't. Another profound shift happens when you walk alone. You stop accepting half love. You stop settling for people who give you the bare minimum. You stop tolerating relationships built on convenience, inconsistency, and emotional manipulation. When you love yourself deeply, you recognize immediately when someone is not treating you with the respect you deserve. You no longer try to fix people who are incapable of loving you. You no longer chase people who walk away. You no longer pour your energy into proving your worth. Solitude teaches you that love should never feel like begging, that if you must fight to be valued, you are in the wrong place. As your inner love grows, your external world changes. The relationships you once clung to begin to look smaller, less meaningful, and less aligned with who you are becoming. You see clearly that many people were drawn not to your spirit, but to your ability to give them what they lacked. They came to take, not to build. They came to be loved, not to love. Walking alone sharpens your awareness so deeply that you start recognizing these patterns instantly. You stop giving your heart to people who haven't earned access to it. And then something beautiful and unexpected happens. When you no longer depend on others for love, you begin attracting healthier, purer, more aligned relationships. Love that grows from inner strength instead of inner emptiness. Love that is mutual instead of one-sided. Love that brings peace instead of anxiety. Love that respects your boundaries instead of crossing them. Love that elevates your soul instead of breaking your spirit. This is the love that enters your life when you stop begging and start becoming whole. Walking alone teaches you the most important truth of all. You were never unlovable. You were simply giving your heart to people who didn't know how to love. When you start giving that love to yourself, your world transforms. You rise from emotional dependence into emotional freedom. You rise from asking to choosing. You rise from craving to appreciating. You rise from emptiness to fullness. This is the power of solitude. It shows you that self-love is not a luxury. It is your foundation. When you stop seeking love outside and begin cultivating it within, you finally become complete. 6. Walking alone breaks the illusion that you are weak without others. Human beings are conditioned from childhood to believe that strength comes from having people around you, from being supported, accepted, understood, and surrounded by familiar faces. You are taught, sometimes directly, sometimes silently, that being alone means you are unloved, unwanted, or somehow not enough. Society glorifies togetherness but rarely teaches the power of solitude. As a result, many people carry an invisible fear throughout their lives, the fear that they cannot survive emotionally, mentally, or spiritually without someone by their side. They cling to relationships that sabotage their peace, friendships that drain their energy, and environments that shrink their growth simply because they believe they are too weak to stand alone. But walking alone challenges this belief in the most profound way. When you remove the constant presence of others, when you step away from the safety net of emotional dependency, you are forced to confront the truth about your inner strength. At first, it feels like being dropped into unfamiliar territory. Your fears get louder, your insecurities become clearer, your doubts surface. But instead of breaking you, this experience begins to rebuild you. What you once interpreted as weakness was never weakness. It was simply unused strength. Strength that was buried under comfort, routine, and attachment. Strength that never had the chance to show itself because your dependence covered it like a blanket. In Buddhism, the mind becomes strong not through resistance but through understanding. When you walk alone, you begin to understand your own capacity. You see that you can handle silence without collapsing. You see that you can make decisions without seeking approval. You see that your emotions may shake you, but they do not destroy you. You survive moments you once feared, and with each passing day, you gather evidence that you are more resilient than you ever believed. Solitude becomes a mirror that reflects your true inner power. Power that was always there, but remained hidden behind the presence of others. Walking alone forces you to solve your own problems, to comfort your own heart, and to rebuild your own spirit. You learn that you can navigate emotional storms without someone holding your hand. You learn that you can get through difficult days without external reassurance. You learn that you can build a meaningful life even when no one is cheering for you. This realization transforms your entire identity. You go from thinking, "I need people to survive," to understanding, "I am capable, complete, and grounded within myself." This shift is not just emotional, it is spiritual. When you no longer need others to feel safe, loved, or validated, you unplug yourself from the illusions that keep most people trapped. The illusion that your value is defined by who stays or leaves. The illusion that your happiness is dependent on someone else's presence. The illusion that being alone means being powerless. But solitude shatters these illusions piece by piece. It shows you that your value is constant, independent of who comes or goes. It shows you that your happiness can be built internally. It shows you that your power comes from your consciousness, your clarity, and your connection with yourself, not from external support. Think about how many decisions people make out of fear. Fear of being abandoned, fear of disappointing others, fear of standing out, fear of not belonging. These fears push them into relationships that dim their light, friendships that betray their trust, families that shame their individuality, and social circles that judge rather than support. But when you choose solitude, you confront these fears instead of hiding behind them. You learn that abandonment does not kill you, it frees you. You learn that rejection does not break you, it redirects you. You learn that loneliness is not a curse, it is an invitation to deepen your relationship with yourself. Over time, the fear that once controlled you dissolves. You stop being terrified of losing people because you no longer lose yourself in the process. You stop fearing disappointment because you become your own source of reassurance. You stop fearing silence because silence becomes the space where your intuition speaks with the most clarity. You stop fearing solitude because you understand that solitude is not emptiness, it is awakening. And something powerful happens when the fear disappears. People can no longer manipulate you. No one can guilt-trip you into staying in toxic relationships. No one can control you through emotional dependence. No one can break you through silence or distance. No one can threaten you with abandonment because you are no longer afraid of being alone. This is the kind of strength that solitude builds, the kind of strength that cannot be defeated by emotional games, manipulation, or social pressure. You become grounded, stable, anchored, and impossible to shake. Walking alone also expands your understanding of freedom. When you are no longer tied to pleasing others, you live from your truth instead of their expectations. You go where your soul feels aligned, not where others want you to be. You speak with honesty instead of fear. You choose relationships based on mutual respect, not emotional dependency. You live from a place of inner sovereignty, not from the need for external validation. One day, you will look back and realize that the moment you decided to walk alone was the moment your real strength began to rise. The moment you stopped relying on others was the moment you discovered the depth of your own resilience. The moment you faced your inner fears was the moment you stopped fearing the outside world. Solitude breaks the illusion of weakness by showing you the truth. You are not weak without others. You are just unaware of how powerful you are within yourself. This is the transformation that walking alone gives you. You do not just become stronger, you become unshakable. You do not just become independent, you become whole. You do not just survive alone, you thrive alone. And once you reach this level of inner strength, no person, no rejection, no silence, and no loss can ever break you again. 7. When you no longer need anyone, you attract better people naturally. One of the most surprising and transformative things that happens when you begin walking alone is that the quality of people you attract changes in ways you never expected. Most individuals believe that being alone reduces connections, opportunities, or relationships. They think solitude means losing people, becoming isolated, or being forgotten by the world. But in reality, the opposite is true. Solitude does not reduce your relationships, it purifies them. It does not make you invisible, it makes you magnetic to the right souls. It does not isolate you, it aligns you. When you no longer need anyone to complete you, the universe begins sending people who complement you. To understand why this happens, you must first look at what drives most human relationships. People often bond out of fear, loneliness, insecurity, or emotional need rather than genuine alignment. Many friendships are built on convenience rather than connection. Many romantic relationships are based on filling emotional gaps rather than shared purpose. Many social circles form from habit or proximity rather than true resonance. When you are emotionally dependent, you unintentionally attract people who sense that dependency. You attract those who take advantage of your kindness because they know you fear being alone. You attract those who contribute little because they feel confident you won't leave. You attract relationships lacking depth because your insecurity creates space for superficial connections. You attract chaos because your emptiness becomes a magnet for people who feed off your energy. But when you walk alone long enough to heal these insecurities, everything changes. You begin radiating a very different kind of energy, a quiet, stable, grounded strength. People can feel when a person is complete within themselves. They can feel when someone is not desperate for attention, validation, or affection. They can feel when a person's peace is not easily disturbed. And this energy is rare, attractive, and deeply respected. When you no longer rely on others to feel whole, you stop sending the unconscious signals of emotional hunger, which previously attracted the wrong types of people. Instead, you begin sending signals of stability, clarity, and self-worth, signals that attract people who carry the same qualities. Buddhism teaches that like attracts like, not in a superficial or mystical sense, but in an energetic truth. The state of your inner world determines the state of the people you draw into your outer world. When you were anxious, you attracted anxious relationships. When you were insecure, you attracted people who took advantage of insecurities. When you were lost, you attracted those who kept you lost. When you were emotionally dependent, you attracted people who were emotionally unavailable, because dependency and unavailability form dysfunctional pairs. But when you begin walking alone and cultivating inner wholeness, you shift the frequency of your relationships. Your standards rise not because you force them to rise, but because you simply no longer resonate with people who cannot meet them. As you spend more time alone, you begin to understand what your heart truly needs. You begin to see with clarity who feeds your energy and who drains it. You become more selective, not out of judgment, but out of self-respect. You begin to value peace over popularity, depth over attention, loyalty over excitement, and truth over convenience. This shift is powerful because it naturally eliminates people who cannot offer these things. You stop tolerating inconsistency because you are no longer emotionally desperate. You stop excusing disrespect because you respect yourself too much. You stop entertaining unbalanced relationships because your soul no longer resonates with imbalance. This creates an internal filter so strong that only aligned people can enter your life. But here is the part most people misunderstand. Walking alone does not mean shutting people out. It means becoming so grounded within yourself that connections are chosen consciously, not out of fear. It means no longer keeping people around just to avoid loneliness. It means no longer forcing relationships that break your spirit. It means knowing that you are whole whether someone stays or leaves. This level of self-possession changes everything. People who are manipulative, inconsistent, or emotionally chaotic can no longer influence you because you are not moved by their presence or absence. They cannot take advantage of your fear because you no longer fear solitude. They cannot pull you into emotional games because you do not play from insecurity. Instead, you begin attracting people who are drawn to your strength, people who see your calmness and feel inspired by it, people who value your presence instead of exploiting it, people who respect your boundaries instead of testing them, people who meet you with effort, not excuses, people who communicate clearly because they are also emotionally mature, people who support your growth rather than compete with it, people who carry peace instead of chaos. These are the souls who enter your life when you walk alone long enough to build inner completeness. Something else remarkable happens. You begin forming relationships from mutual choice, not mutual dependency. You choose people because they add value to your journey, not because you are afraid to walk without them. You choose relationships that are built on shared values, emotional balance, loyalty, honesty, and respect. You begin to see that fewer people are better than many. That one loyal presence is better than 100 empty connections. That one meaningful bond is more valuable than 1,000 superficial admirers. You no longer confuse attention with love, noise with connection, or presence with loyalty. This wisdom becomes your filter. Another important transformation occurs. Your self-worth no longer fluctuates based on how others treat you. You stop internalizing people's behavior. If someone pulls away, you no longer blame yourself. You understand they were simply not aligned. If someone leaves, you no longer break down. You recognize that they were never meant to stay. If someone disrespects you, you no longer tolerate it. You walk away without fear. This emotional liberation makes you magnetic because emotional independence is rare and deeply attractive. People admire those who can walk away from what does not serve them. They respect those who do not tolerate disrespect. They gravitate toward those who are peaceful, stable, and centered. And as your energy changes, your relationships change. You begin experiencing friendships that feel uplifting rather than draining. You meet people who encourage you rather than compete with you. You attract partners who want to build with you, not control you. You find companions who respect your solitude rather than fear it. Your connections become conscious, mutually beneficial, and spiritually aligned. These relationships feel lighter, safer, deeper, and more fulfilling because they come from abundance, not from need. What you once begged for from the wrong people, you now receive effortlessly from the right ones. What you once chased, you now attract. What you once tolerated, you now reject. What you once feared losing, you now see clearly was never meant for you. Walking alone brings you to a place where your presence becomes a privilege, not something you give freely to anyone. Your love becomes valuable, your energy becomes sacred, and your boundaries become unbreakable. And the people who enter your life at this stage recognize and honor this. In the end, walking alone does not make you lonely, it makes you whole. And when you become whole, you naturally attract those who are whole as well. You attract people who walk beside you, not ahead of you or behind you. People who love without conditions, who communicate without games, and who stay without needing to be chased. Solitude doesn't just change who you are, it changes who you attract. And when you no longer need anyone to feel complete, you finally meet the people who are worthy of walking with the complete version of you. 8. Solitude teaches you the art of inner peace, a peace no one can take away. There is a kind of peace that cannot be bought, cannot be borrowed, cannot be gifted, and cannot be found in any relationship, friendship, or external source. It is the peace that comes from being deeply connected with yourself. It is the peace that grows only when you have walked alone long enough to understand your inner world with honesty and courage. Many people spend their entire lives searching for peace in places where peace does not exist, in relationships that drain them, in friendships that betray them, in social approval that never lasts, in material achievements that bring momentary satisfaction but no true grounding. But solitude reveals a profound truth. Peace is not found in the world. Peace is found in the self. And as long as you depend on others to feel settled, you will always carry a fragile, unstable version of peace that can be taken away at any moment. When you walk alone, without the noise of other people's emotions, without the pressure of their expectations, and without the weight of their judgments, you begin to feel something you may not have felt in years: silence. A silence that is not empty but full. A silence that is not lonely but welcoming. A silence that allows your mind to breathe, your emotions to settle, and your spirit to finally sit without running, hiding, or pretending. This silence is where inner peace is born. It is in this silence that you learn what your mind feels like, without the influence of others. It is in this silence that you discover which emotions were truly yours and which ones you absorbed from the people around you. It is in this silence that you begin to understand how deeply you were shaped by environments that were never meant for your soul. Most people fear silence because silence reveals truth. In the presence of others, you can distract yourself from your inner conflicts. You can avoid your insecurities by burying them under constant conversations, constant entertainment, or constant companionship. But when you walk alone, there is nowhere to run from yourself. Your mind sits with its own thoughts. Your heart sits with its own desires. Your fears rise to the surface, but so does your strength. Your sadness becomes visible, but so does your resilience. Your confusion becomes louder, but so does your clarity. In this raw honesty, peace begins to take shape, not the peace that comes from having an easy life, but the peace that comes from understanding yourself fully. Buddhism teaches that peace is not the absence of problems, it is the presence of wisdom. And wisdom grows only in stillness. When you allow yourself to walk alone, you create the stillness necessary for wisdom to take root. You begin to see that your emotions are not your enemies, they are your teachers. You begin to understand that suffering does not come from life itself, but from resisting what life asks you to accept. You begin to realize that inner peace is built not by controlling your circumstances, but by learning how to remain centered regardless of circumstances. This is the kind of peace solitude shapes, a peace that is internal, stable, grounded, and unshakable. As you spend more time alone, you begin to recognize the patterns of your mind. You start noticing how quickly your mind reacts to negativity, how deeply it absorbs criticism, and how easily it gets overwhelmed by stress. But instead of feeling defeated by this awareness, you begin to understand the roots of your reactions. You see which fears were planted by childhood experiences. You notice which insecurities were created by past relationships. You understand which beliefs were absorbed from society rather than formed by your own truth. You begin to untangle your authentic self from the self that was shaped by others. This separation is the foundation of inner peace, because peace grows only from authenticity, never from imitation. Walking alone teaches you how to regulate your emotions without leaning on others to soothe you. You learn how to calm your own mind through reflection rather than distraction. You learn how to breathe through discomfort rather than escape from it. You learn how to hold your pain gently rather than bury it. You learn how to face your anxiety rather than mask it. Solitude reveals that emotional struggles do not disappear when people surround you. They disappear when you learn how to manage them with wisdom, patience, and awareness. And this emotional self-management becomes one of your greatest strengths. Inner peace also grows from boundaries, something solitude teaches you with crystal clarity. When you walk alone, you begin to recognize which people disrupt your peace and which people nourish it. You see who makes you feel drained after a conversation and who leaves you feeling understood. You begin to feel the energetic difference between those who come with intention and those who come with neediness. Solitude teaches you how to say no without guilt, how to protect your space without apology, and how to guard your energy without feeling selfish. These boundaries become the walls around your peace. walls that are not built from fear but from wisdom. As you deepen your relationship with solitude, you begin to appreciate the small joys of life that you once overlooked. You realize that peace is found in simple things: the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the taste of morning tea, the sound of your breath, the softness of silence, the rhythm of your footsteps, the calmness of a quiet evening. You begin observing life with more presence and intention. You stop rushing, you stop forcing, you stop chasing, you relax into the moment. And in this relaxation, you find a peace that no person, place, or achievement could ever give you. Something else changes when you walk alone for long enough. Your mind stops creating unnecessary stories. Most suffering comes from assumptions, overthinking, and emotional reactivity. But solitude teaches you how to witness your thoughts instead of getting trapped in them. You begin watching your mind like a river. Thoughts pass, emotions flow, fears rise and fall. You begin to understand that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness observing them. This shift alone is life-changing. You stop being emotionally hijacked by every negative thought. You stop interpreting every situation as an attack. You stop believing every story your mind creates. You begin finding peace, not by trying to silence your mind, but by learning not to identify with it. As your inner peace grows, your external world transforms. You stop reacting to people's behavior with emotional intensity. Someone's rude remark no longer ruins your day. Someone's silence no longer triggers your insecurity. Someone's rejection no longer breaks your spirit. Someone's absence no longer feels like abandonment. Why? Because your peace no longer depends on them. Your peace is internal, not borrowed. It is stable, not fragile. It is yours, not theirs. Eventually, this peace becomes your aura. It radiates from you in the way you speak, the way you walk, the way you breathe, and the way you respond to life. People begin noticing a calmness in you, a groundedness, a softness that cannot be shaken. They sense that your energy is steady, your presence is warm, and your mind is centered. And the right people are drawn to this peace, not because they want to take it from you, but because they are aligned with it. The wrong people, however, naturally fall away, because chaos cannot survive near peace. Manipulation fails near awareness. Drama suffocates near clarity. Toxicity retreats near strength. By the time solitude has finished shaping you, you stand in a place where no one can disturb your peace without your permission. You no longer collapse under emotional pressure. You no longer run from discomfort. You no longer attach your happiness to external circumstances. You walk through life with a quiet confidence, a deep self-understanding, and an inner stability that many spend their entire lives searching for. And all of this becomes possible because you chose to walk alone long enough to find the peace that was always hidden inside you. 9. Solitude awakens your higher self, the version of you that cannot emerge in crowds. There comes a point on your journey of solitude where something inside you begins to shift so deeply that you can no longer recognize the person you used to be. This shift does not happen suddenly like lightning. It grows slowly like dawn. It begins the moment you stop filling every empty space in your life with people, noise, or distractions, and instead choose to sit with yourself long enough to truly meet the person you have avoided for years. This is the awakening of your higher self, the version of you that has always existed beneath layers of fear, expectations, attachments, and illusions. And this awakening can only begin when you walk alone. Most people never meet their higher self because they never give themselves the silence required for transformation. They are always surrounded by the opinions of others, always entangled in social roles, always performing, pleasing, adjusting, and surviving. Their energy is scattered. Their identity is shaped externally. Their truth is suppressed beneath what they believe they must be rather than who they truly are. But when you walk alone, all the things that once distracted you from yourself begin to fall away. and your inner world rises to the surface like a forgotten truth waiting to be remembered. This awakening begins with awareness. You start noticing patterns in your behavior that you once ignored, how often you hid your emotions to avoid judgment, how many times you said yes when you wanted to say no, how frequently you accepted less than you deserved because you feared being alone. At first, these realizations can feel uncomfortable, even painful. But this discomfort is the breaking of your old self, the version of you built from fear, shaped by society, and limited by insecurity. Solitude forces you to confront the emotional wounds you spent years covering with relationships, friendships, and distractions. You begin to see clearly the pain you inherited, the beliefs you absorbed, and the limitations you internalized. You see the younger versions of yourself who were ignored, misunderstood, or judged, and for the first time, you allow them to be heard. In Buddhism, awakening begins when you stop running from your emotions, your thoughts, your past, and yourself. Solitude is the ground where this stopping happens. When the world is quiet, when people are distant, when you have no one left to impress, the truth becomes impossible to avoid. You are left face to face with your real self, not the version crafted for others, but the soul beneath it. And in this meeting, a new strength begins to rise. You realize that your entire life, you have lived inside a shell created to survive your environment, not to express your true essence. But solitude cracks that shell open. It reveals the potential, wisdom, creativity, intuition, and spiritual depth that were buried under noise. As you walk alone deeper into introspection, you begin noticing a separation happening inside you, the separation between your conditioned self and your authentic self. The conditioned self is built by the world it fears, rejection, depends on validation, avoids discomfort, and attaches itself to relationships for identity. This self lives in survival mode and is constantly influenced by external energies. The authentic self, however, does not chase approval, does not fear solitude, and does not shrink for others. It is grounded, aware, compassionate, and aligned with truth. This authentic self is your higher self, and solitude is the only environment where it can emerge fully. Walking alone creates the silence necessary for your higher self to speak. You begin hearing intuitive insights you once ignored, the subtle knowing that tells you what is right or wrong for your soul, the internal voice guiding you toward purpose, the inner wisdom helping you break cycles you once felt trapped in. The more time you spend alone, the stronger this voice becomes. It starts replacing doubt with clarity, fear with understanding, and confusion with direction. You begin making decisions not from anxiety, but from awareness. You start choosing people not from desperation, but from discernment. You stop settling for lives you have outgrown because you finally see the life you are meant to live. Something extraordinary also happens when your higher self awakens. Your relationship with your emotions transforms completely. Instead of being controlled by them, you begin understanding them. Instead of reacting impulsively, you respond with awareness. Instead of suppressing pain, you process it gently. You realize that emotions are not obstacles, they are signals. They point you toward areas in your life where healing, boundaries, or change is needed. Solitude gives you the time and mental space to decode these emotional messages. It allows you to heal from experiences you never fully processed, relationships that never fully ended, and wounds you never fully acknowledged. This healing is not surface level, it is deep, slow, and transformative. It reshapes your identity from the inside out. As your higher self continues to rise, you begin seeing your past from a place of compassion rather than regret. You realize that every mistake, every heartbreak, every loss, and every disappointment was part of the journey that led you here. You no longer see your past as something to escape from, but as something that shaped your wisdom. You understand that nothing in your life was random. Every pain revealed a truth. Every setback redirected your path. Every rejection removed someone misaligned. And every moment of loneliness was preparing you for this awakening. This spiritual understanding brings a deep sense of peace. You begin accepting life rather than resisting it. You stop fighting reality and start working with it. You no longer cling to outcomes or force relationships to last. You begin trusting the natural flow of life, the idea that what is meant for you will reach you and what is not meant for you will leave. This trust is one of the clearest signs your higher self has awakened. Most people panic when things fall apart. Awakened people understand that falling apart is often falling into place. Another powerful shift occurs. Your standards transform. You no longer tolerate relationships that suffocate your growth. You stop entertaining friendships built on gossip, insecurity, or convenience. You stop giving your time to people who drain your soul. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop shrinking yourself to fit inside spaces that no longer match your energy. These standards do not come from ego, they come from alignment. When your higher self rises, you recognize your worth without needing others to confirm it. As your energy becomes clearer, your purpose becomes clearer as well. You begin understanding why your soul is here, what your natural gifts are, and where your path is leading. This clarity does not arrive all at once. It unfolds slowly, like petals opening in sunlight. You begin noticing synchronicities, intuitive nudges, meaningful opportunities, and spiritual signs guiding you forward. People begin entering your life with purpose rather than coincidence. You find yourself drawn to environments that elevate you rather than environments that drain you. And gradually, your life starts aligning with your inner truth. Walking alone also teaches you something profound about connection. The right people are drawn to your higher self, not to your fears or insecurities. When you were emotionally dependent, you attracted people who benefited from your dependence. But when your higher self awakens, you attract people who respect your awakening. People who want to grow with you, not hold you back. People who support your journey, not sabotage it. People who value your depth, not fear it. People who bring peace into your life, not chaos. These are the relationships that fill your soul, not empty it. Your higher self also reshapes the way you view solitude. Instead of seeing it as loneliness, you begin seeing it as nourishment. You understand that being alone is not a lack of connection, it is the presence of clarity. You see solitude as a sanctuary where your authentic self can breathe, grow, and evolve without interruption. You realize that loneliness is the feeling of missing yourself, not others, and solitude is the path back to rediscovering yourself fully. As you continue walking alone, you become more stable, less reactive, more compassionate, less judgmental, more intentional, and less influenced by external chaos. Your inner world becomes so strong and balanced that the outside world loses its power to shake you. You stop craving validation because you validate yourself. You stop seeking approval because you approve of your truth. You stop chasing relationships because you embody completeness. The ultimate transformation happens when you realize that the power you were looking for outside love, strength, peace, clarity, understanding, acceptance was always waiting inside you. Walking alone simply cleared the noise so you could finally access it. Your higher self rises not because you force it to, but because solitude removes everything blocking its light. You become a new version of yourself, stronger, wiser, calmer, deeper, more aware, and more connected to the truth of your existence. You begin living life from authenticity rather than fear, from presence rather than anxiety, from intuition rather than confusion, from peace rather than chaos. And one day, without even noticing it, you look back at your old life and realize that solitude wasn't something you survived, it was something that saved you. Your higher self was always there. Solitude just opened the door. 10. Walking alone teaches you to hear the voice of destiny, the guidance you miss when you're surrounded by noise. There is a silent path that runs beneath your entire life, a path of destiny, purpose, inner calling, and spiritual direction. It is always there, always guiding, always whispering, always nudging you toward the life you were meant to live. But most people never hear this guidance because their minds are too loud, their surroundings too chaotic, and their hearts too tangled in attachments to recognize the signs. Destiny does not shout. It whispers. It does not force. It invites. It does not push. It guides. And it can only be heard when you create enough stillness within yourself to listen. This is why walking alone becomes one of the most powerful spiritual turning points in your life. Solitude is not just a break from people. It is a reunion with your inner guidance. It is the moment when the voice of your destiny becomes clearer than the voices around you. You begin to sense the directions your soul has been trying to take you toward for years, but which were drowned out by societal pressure, emotional dependency, and fear of judgment. When you walk alone long enough, your life begins to realign with its true purpose. Destiny is not random. It is not a series of accidents. It is the unfolding of your deepest potential, guided by the inner wisdom you were born with. But that wisdom is subtle. It exists beneath the noise of insecurity, beneath the fear of being misunderstood, beneath the pressure to conform, and beneath the emotional attachments that keep you tied to paths that are not yours. When you finally step away from the noise and choose solitude, destiny begins to reveal itself layer by layer. At first, it feels like intuition, a quiet feeling inside you that something needs to change. A knowing that certain people no longer belong in your journey. A sense that your current environment no longer supports your growth. You may feel restless or strangely pulled towards something new, something unfamiliar, something you cannot explain logically. This is the first sign that your destiny is speaking. It rarely uses words. Instead, it uses feelings, patterns, signs, synchronicities, and inner shifts. But when you are constantly surrounded by others, these signals are buried beneath the noise of external influence. When you walk alone, you begin to hear these signals clearly. You start noticing that your body reacts to certain people differently. Some drain your energy instantly, while others make you feel lighter and stronger. You begin noticing that certain environments make you feel trapped, while others make you feel free. You start paying attention to the emotional reactions you once ignored, the dreams you dismissed, the desires you suppressed, and the passions you abandoned because someone told you they were impractical or impossible. Solitude reintroduces you to your inner truth, the essence of your destiny. In Buddhism, the path of Dharma, the path of one's true purpose, cannot be followed without awareness. Awareness requires quietness. Quietness requires solitude. Solitude requires courage. And this courage is exactly what begins to grow in you when you walk alone long enough to decline the distractions that once kept you from yourself. As you turn inward, the noise decreases and the guidance grows louder. You begin understanding that your destiny was never hidden from you. You were simply too distracted to hear it. Walking alone also helps you break free from the paths that were never meant for you. Many people live lives shaped by outside expectations, careers chosen to impress others, relationships maintained out of guilt, habits formed from imitation, and goals based on fear rather than desire. This creates a life that looks successful from the outside, but feels empty inside. But solitude breaks the illusion. When you spend time alone, the mismatch between your life and your destiny becomes impossible to ignore. You begin to sense the misalignment. You feel tired in places that should bring joy. You feel uninspired by roles that once felt fulfilling. You feel disconnected from choices that do not match your soul's truth. This is not a crisis, it is a calling. It is your destiny urging you to change direction. It is your higher self trying to redirect you back to the path you were meant to walk. Solitude gives you the clarity to see that change is not scary. Staying misaligned is. It teaches you that letting go is not a loss. It is a return to your path. And it shows you that leaving behind people, habits, or environments that no longer reflect your truth is not abandonment, it is liberation. As you continue walking alone, your sensitivity to spiritual guidance becomes sharper. You begin noticing synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that show up at the perfect time. A book appears when you need wisdom. A person enters your life when you need direction. An opportunity arrives when you are ready. A door closes because it was never your door. A rejection becomes protection. A delay becomes divine timing. You begin to see patterns connecting moments you once thought were random. This is how destiny communicates with precision, timing, and symbolic clarity. But only those who walk alone long enough to quiet their minds can recognize these signs. Another powerful shift happens. Your decisions stop being fear-based and start being soul-based. When you relied on others for validation, you made choices to please people, avoid conflict, or maintain relationships. You followed the familiar instead of the meaningful. You stayed where you were accepted rather than where you belonged. But solitude teaches you to trust your inner compass more than external opinion. Your decisions begin aligning with your intuition. Your next steps are guided by clarity, not confusion. You move from survival mode into purpose mode. You act not out of desperation, but out of direction. This inner shift brings more peace than you ever imagined. You stop rushing, you stop seeking, you stop forcing. You begin flowing with the natural rhythm of your life. You begin trusting that what is meant for you will never require you to betray yourself. You let go of timelines created by society and instead follow divine timing. You stop comparing your journey to others because you understand that your destiny is unique. You start living from a place of surrender, not passive surrender, but spiritual surrender, the kind that brings calmness and confidence because you trust the path unfolding before you. Walking alone also changes how you see relationships. You begin to understand that not every person is meant to stay forever. Some people come into your life to teach lessons, reveal truths, inspire growth, or redirect your path. Others serve as mirrors that show you your wounds, your strengths, and your patterns. But when their purpose is complete, they fade from your life. This is not abandonment, it is completion. Solitude teaches you to release people gracefully when their chapter is over. You stop clinging, chasing, or begging because you understand that destiny brings the right people at the right time. You stop forcing relationships and start trusting alignment. The deeper you walk alone, the more you realize that destiny is not only about purpose, it is also about identity. It is about becoming the person your soul came here to become. And that transformation requires shedding old versions of yourself. Solitude becomes the space where this shedding occurs. You let go of the version of you that tolerated disrespect. You let go of the version of you that feared rejection. You let go of the version that lived for approval. You let go of the version that settled for less. You let go of the version that betrayed your own needs to keep peace with others. You let go of the version that did not believe in your potential. In this shedding, your true identity emerges stronger, wiser, and aligned with your destiny. As your inner world transforms, so does your outer world. New opportunities begin to appear, ones that match your growth, your purpose, and your energy. People enter your life who recognize your worth without needing explanations. Environments begin to feel different because you interact with them from a place of clarity, not confusion. You begin creating a life intentionally rather than accidentally. You move with purpose rather than drifting based on circumstances. You begin to trust that even when things do not make sense immediately, they are part of a larger picture that will reveal itself in time. And perhaps the greatest gift of walking alone is this: you realize that destiny is not a place you arrive at, but a path you walk daily. It is not a single moment of achievement, but a continuous unfolding of your potential. It is not about reaching perfection, but about becoming aligned. Destiny is not found in others, it is found within yourself, and solitude is the bridge that leads you to that discovery. When you walk alone long enough, you develop a relationship with your inner guidance so deep that nothing outside can shake you. You trust the timing of your life, you trust the lessons, you trust the redirections, you trust the endings, you trust the beginnings, you trust the pauses, you trust the unknown, you trust yourself. And when you reach this level of trust, you stop fearing the future because you understand that your destiny is not something you chase, it is something you grow into. Walking alone becomes the spiritual crucible where you transform from someone shaped by the world into someone shaped by truth. It becomes the doorway into your higher calling. It becomes the ground where your soul remembers its purpose. It becomes the silence where destiny finally speaks clearly. You are meant for more, and your path is unfolding exactly as it should. 11. Solitude teaches you radical self-trust, the unshakable confidence that comes from depending on yourself. One of the greatest gifts solitude gives you, one of the most powerful transformations that quietly begins to shape your life, is the birth of radical self-trust. Not the shallow confidence that comes from external praise, temporary success, or other people's approval. Not the fragile confidence that disappears the moment someone criticizes you or walks away, but a deep-rooted, unbreakable, spiritually grounded trust in yourself, your choices, your intuition, your resilience, your judgment, your ability to navigate life, and your inner truth. This self-trust cannot be taught by society, relationships, family, or friends. It can only grow in the silence of walking alone. Most people spend their entire lives doubting themselves because they were conditioned to look outside for reassurance. From childhood, you are taught to listen to authority more than your own thoughts, to trust others' opinions more than your own intuition, to measure your worth through approval, and to second-guess every desire unless it matches society's expectations. You grow up believing that someone else always knows better: your parents, teachers, friends, partners, bosses, or elders. Without realizing it, you begin outsourcing your decisions, seeking confirmation before every step, and fearing mistakes because you fear judgment. This constant reliance on others weakens your inner voice. Your intuition becomes quieter, your clarity becomes foggy, your confidence becomes conditional, your decisions become influenced by fear rather than wisdom. And the more you depend on others for guidance, the more you lose connection with your own internal compass. This is why so many people feel lost, even when they are surrounded by advice, because they have forgotten how to hear themselves beneath the noise. But when you walk alone, truly alone, something begins to shift. When there is no one left to tell you what to do, no one to validate your choices, no one to reassure you, no one to hold your hand, and no one to guide your path, you are forced to look inward. At first, this feels terrifying. Your mind panics. What if I choose wrong? What if I fail? What if I disappoint others? What if I ruin my life? But beneath that fear lies the beginning of liberation. Because for the first time, you are not choosing based on expectations, you are choosing based on truth. Walking alone makes you confront the parts of yourself you once doubted. It forces you to rely on your own judgment. It makes you solve your own problems. It teaches you how to stand firm, even when no one agrees with you. It shows you that you are capable of navigating life without constant support. And each decision you make, each step you take on your own, strengthens your inner trust. You begin to see that you didn't need as much guidance as you were conditioned to believe. You simply needed space to hear yourself. In Buddhism, self-trust is seen as an essential foundation of awakening. It is the understanding that your mind is not your enemy, it is your teacher. Your intuition is not random, it is wisdom. Your desires are not foolish, they are signals. Your mistakes are not failures, they are lessons. But to access this wisdom, you must be willing to silence the world long enough to listen. Solitude provides the perfect environment for this listening. In the quiet, you rediscover a voice within you that was always there, calm, clear, ancient, and wise. As you continue your solitary path, your intuition becomes stronger. You start recognizing that your inner voice was right far more often than you ever realized. You recall moments where ignoring your intuition led to pain, and moments where following it brought peace. You start trusting that subtle pull inside you, the feeling that tells you when something is wrong, when someone is fake, when a path is misaligned, or when an opportunity is truly meant for you. This inner knowing becomes your compass. You begin to rely on it more than opinions, advice, or trends. You begin to value your own perspective more than the noise around you. This radical self-trust changes the entire way you move through life. Decision-making becomes easier because you no longer seek approval, you seek alignment. Uncertainty becomes less frightening because you trust your ability to figure things out. Rejection hurts less because you trust that what leaves your life is not meant to stay. Failure scares you less because you trust your ability to rebuild. Challenges no longer intimidate you because you trust your resilience. You stop hesitating and start acting decisively because you trust your path, even when it doesn't make sense yet. Self-trust also transforms your relationships. You stop allowing people to speak over your truth. You stop giving others authority over your emotions. You stop tolerating manipulation or gaslighting because you trust your perception enough to recognize when something feels off. You stop explaining yourself excessively because you know your choices don't require permission. You stop clinging to people who do not match your authenticity because you trust the universe will bring better. This self-trust becomes your shield. It protects you from becoming lost in someone else's world. Walking alone also teaches you how to embrace mistakes without fear. When you trust yourself deeply, you no longer see mistakes as proof of your inadequacy. You see them as part of the learning process. You understand that failure is not the end, it is a teacher. You realize that every misstep provides clarity, every setback provides redirection, and every disappointment provides wisdom. This perspective removes the paralysis that once held you back. You no longer delay your dreams, silence your desires, or restrain your ambitions due to fear of failure. Instead, you begin taking confident steps forward because you trust your ability to adapt, grow, and rise from anything. Another profound change happens. You begin to see the difference between fear and intuition. In the past, your decisions were shaped by fear, fear of being alone, fear of being judged, fear of making the wrong choice. But in solitude, these fears become louder before they dissolve. You learn to distinguish between the voice of fear and the voice of inner wisdom. Fear shouts, panics, and threatens. Intuition whispers, nudges, and guides. Fear feels heavy and restrictive. Intuition feels light and expansive. Fear wants you to stay the same. Intuition wants you to grow. When you walk alone long enough, this distinction becomes second nature. This deep trust in yourself eventually evolves into trust in the universe. When you stop relying on external safety nets, you realize that life has always been guiding you, even in moments that felt uncertain. You begin to see how one closed door led to the right opportunity, how one heartbreak protected you from greater pain, how one setback prepared you for something larger, how one ending made space for a new beginning. This connection between inner trust and universal trust becomes a powerful spiritual synergy. You trust yourself to choose the path, and you trust the universe to guide the journey. Solitude teaches you something else essential: the ability to take responsibility for your life without blaming yourself for the past. Radical self-trust does not mean blaming yourself for things that went wrong. It means owning your choices, learning from them, and choosing better moving forward. You stop viewing yourself as a victim of life and start seeing yourself as the creator of your path. You stop waiting for others to fix your circumstances and start taking aligned action. You stop relying on hope alone and start building direction with intention. As your self-trust deepens, you start making bold choices, choices that your past self never had the courage to make. You distance yourself from toxic environments because you trust you can handle solitude. You pursue dreams others find unrealistic because you trust your ability to learn and adapt. You set boundaries confidently because you trust your worth. You walk away from relationships that drain you because you trust your ability to heal. You invest in your growth because you trust your future. This transformation of self-trust becomes so strong that people around you begin to notice it without you ever speaking about it. They see it in your energy, calm, steady, and grounded. They see it in your eyes, focused and certain. They see it in your actions, purposeful and intentional. They see it in your silence, peaceful rather than insecure. They see it in the way you carry yourself with quiet confidence rather than loud validation-seeking. This energy becomes unshakable, magnetic, and deeply respected. When you trust yourself fully, your life begins to reflect that trust. Your relationships become healthier because you choose them consciously. Your goals become clearer because you select them intuitively. Your boundaries become firmer because you hold them confidently. Your growth becomes inevitable because you pursue it fearlessly. Your peace becomes stable because it comes from within, not from external circumstances. And this is perhaps the most profound truth solitude teaches you. The only approval you will ever need in life is your own. When you finally trust yourself, the world cannot pull you away from your path anymore. Opinions no longer control you. Doubts no longer sabotage you. Fear no longer limits you. You walk through life guided by your inner compass, a compass that cannot be broken, manipulated, or drowned out. Radical self-trust is the foundation of a powerful life. Solitude is the teacher that builds it. When you walk alone long enough, the relationship you build with yourself becomes stronger than any fear, deeper than any insecurity, and more reliable than any external validation. And once you reach this level of self-trust, you realize something life-changing. You were never truly lost. You simply needed to listen to yourself long enough to find your way. 12. Solitude shows you what truly matters and what you can finally release without fear. There comes a moment in every person's spiritual journey when they begin to question the things they once chased without thinking, the things they thought they needed, the things they believed would bring fulfillment, happiness, or validation. But instead of creating peace, these pursuits filled them with fear, anxiety, comparison, and exhaustion. Most people live their lives collecting things that do not nourish their soul, relationships that drain them, goals that do not belong to them, dreams inherited from society, identities shaped by pressure, and expectations that suffocate their authenticity. But when you walk alone, all these layers begin to fall away one by one, and what remains is the simple, honest truth about what truly matters in your life. Solitude is not just the absence of people, it is the presence of clarity. When you step away from the noise, emotional, mental, social, or societal, you finally see with your own eyes, instead of through the filters of the world. You begin to understand what has real meaning and what is simply attachment disguised as meaning. You start recognizing which relationships nourish your spirit and which ones keep you stuck in cycles of pain. You notice which habits elevate your growth and which habits numb your potential. You begin to see which goals align with your soul and which ones were forced upon you by expectations you never agreed to. This clarity is not immediate, it unfolds gradually. At first, solitude feels like a void. You feel the emptiness of people you used to rely on, the silence of conversations that once filled your time, the absence of voices that influenced your decisions. But slowly, this emptiness becomes spaciousness. This silence becomes awareness. This absence becomes freedom. You begin to understand that the space left behind by what you released is not a loss. It is an opening. An opening for truth, for authenticity, for inner alignment. In Buddhism, the concept of letting go is often misunderstood. People think letting go means giving up, losing something, or becoming emotionally cold. But real letting go is simply the release of what no longer resonates with your true nature. Solitude teaches you this, not through words, but through experience. When you walk alone, you naturally begin shedding the roles you played for others, the masks you wore to fit in, the responsibilities you carried out of guilt, the relationships you maintained out of fear, and the expectations you followed out of habit. You realize that much of your suffering came from holding on to things you never needed. You held on to people who did not value you because you feared being alone. You held on to dreams that did not inspire you because you feared disappointing others. You held on to versions of yourself you had outgrown because you feared change. But solitude gives you the courage to see clearly, and in clarity, you begin to release without hesitation. One of the first things solitude reveals is how much of your energy was spent on things that were never truly important. You begin noticing how much emotional labor you invested into relationships that offered little in return, how many hours you sacrificed to impress people who barely noticed, how many decisions you made to avoid judgment rather than to align with your truth. You start observing your life like an outsider, with honesty instead of attachment. And from this perspective, you naturally begin evaluating what deserves your energy and what no longer does. This evaluation is not harsh, it is compassionate. You do not blame yourself for the past, you simply understand it with greater wisdom. You see that you kept certain people close because you once lacked boundaries. You pursued certain paths because you lacked clarity. You tolerated certain behaviors because you lacked self-love. But solitude transforms these lacks into strengths. It teaches you boundaries through experience, clarity through stillness, and self-love through reflection. As you move deeper into solitude, you begin discovering what truly matters, and you realize it is far simpler than the world made it seem. Peace matters more than popularity. Presence matters more than productivity. Inner truth matters more than external approval. Connection matters more than attention. Purpose matters more than performance. And authenticity matters more than acceptance. These realizations begin to reshape your everyday choices. You stop chasing superficial goals because they no longer hold any meaning. You stop seeking validation because you no longer feel empty without it. You stop forcing relationships because you no longer fear solitude. You stop trying to prove yourself because you finally understand your worth. You stop trying to control life because you begin trusting its flow. And as you release what no longer serves you, something beautiful happens. You become lighter. Your mind becomes clearer. Your emotions become calmer. Your spirit becomes stronger. And your path becomes easier to walk. This does not mean life becomes perfect. It means you stop fighting what is not meant for you. You begin responding to life with understanding rather than resistance. Another profound transformation happens. You begin recognizing your own emotional patterns with startling clarity. You notice how certain people trigger your insecurities, how certain environments drain you, how certain habits sabotage your growth. Before solitude, these patterns were invisible because you were too busy, too distracted, or too attached to notice them. But in solitude, you see them clearly. You begin understanding your emotional wounds not as weaknesses, but as areas calling for healing. You develop compassion toward yourself, compassion for the moments you did not know better, for the choices you made out of fear, and for the times you abandoned yourself to keep others close. This compassion becomes the foundation of your inner transformation. Once you see your own patterns clearly, you can finally release them. You stop repeating cycles that hurt you because you understand why they existed in the first place. You stop giving chances to people who have shown you who they are because you stop hoping they will magically change. You stop returning to situations that broke you because you finally value your peace over familiarity. And you stop betraying yourself to maintain harmony because solitude has taught you that your well-being is worth protecting. Another layer of clarity appears as you spend more time alone. You begin to understand what kind of life you truly want. Not the life you were told to want, not the life that others expected, not the life you once chased to feel worthy. You start visualizing a life aligned with your truth, where you are surrounded by people who bring peace, where your work reflects your values, where your environment supports your growth, where you wake up without anxiety, and where you feel deeply connected to your inner purpose. This vision may be simple, but it is real. And once solitude reveals it to you, you no longer settle for anything less. You begin prioritizing experiences over approval, peace over drama, growth over comfort, and healing over repeating old wounds. You begin making choices based on intuition rather than fear. You begin trusting your inner voice more than external noise. This shift in priorities is not accidental. It is the direct result of solitude clearing away what never truly mattered. And then comes perhaps the deepest revelation of all. You realize how much of your identity was shaped by attachment. You believed certain friendships defined your worth. You believed certain relationships defined your value. You believed certain achievements defined your success. You believed certain environments defined your identity. But solitude breaks these illusions. It shows you that you are not defined by who stays or leaves. You are not defined by what you own or achieve. You are not defined by how others see you. You are defined by your awareness, your values, your integrity, your growth, and your connection to your inner self. This realization brings a spiritual calmness that feels like coming home. You finally understand that the things you feared losing were never yours to begin with. The things that stayed heavy were never aligned. The things that caused you suffering were asking to be released. And the things that felt peaceful were always meant for you. As you deepen your relationship with solitude, your heart begins to soften rather than harden. Contrary to what people think, solitude does not make you cold. It makes you wise. It does not make you closed. It makes you selective. It does not make you distant. It makes you discerning. It does not make you unloving. It makes you capable of deeper love because you no longer give your heart to people who do not know how to hold it. And this brings you to the ultimate truth solitude teaches. You can release anything that does not align with your soul, because what is meant for you will never require you to abandon yourself to keep it. You realize that letting go is not the end of love, but the beginning of self-love. You understand that endings are not failures, but transitions. You recognize that release is not loss, but liberation. And you finally trust that the universe removes what is wrong, not to punish you, but to protect you. By the time solitude has finished teaching you, your life becomes radically simpler, yet infinitely richer. You laugh more honestly. You love more wisely. You choose more intentionally. You speak more truthfully. You act more confidently. You rest more peacefully. You live more authentically. Most importantly, you finally understand what matters, and you let go of everything that doesn't. 13. Solitude teaches you the difference between real connection and emotional attachment, and this wisdom changes every relationship forever. There is a quiet truth that only reveals itself to those who spend enough time walking alone. The human heart often confuses attachment for love, familiarity for connection, and emotional dependence for companionship. Most people move through life believing that every strong feeling must be meaningful, that every bond must be kept, and that every relationship that feels intense must be destiny. But solitude exposes the truth behind these illusions with a clarity that cannot be gained in crowded spaces. Solitude is the teacher that separates truth from attachment, love from dependency, and soul connection from emotional habit. Most people never learn this truth because they are constantly surrounded by others, constantly influenced, constantly pulled into emotional currents that do not belong to them. They confuse the closeness created by repeated interactions for deep connection. They confuse the comfort of familiarity for genuine compatibility. They confuse the fear of losing someone with the presence of love. They confuse the need to be needed with the desire to be valued. Without realizing it, they build relationships on patterns rather than purpose, on dependence rather than truth, and on fear rather than freedom. But walking alone changes this entirely. When you spend long stretches of time in your own company without constant distractions, without emotional noise, without people defining your identity, you begin to separate emotional truth from emotional illusion. You realize how often you held on to people not because they nourished your spirit, but because you were afraid of change. You see how often you stayed in connections out of habit, not alignment. You understand how often you tolerated disrespect, inconsistency, and emotional chaos, simply because you feared loneliness more than you valued your own peace. Solitude illuminates these patterns with the sharpness of a mirror you can no longer look away from. And in that mirror, something profound becomes clear. Real connection is rare. Attachment is common. Attachment is built on fear. Connection is built on truth. Attachment drains you. Connection elevates you. Attachment makes you anxious. Connection makes you peaceful. Attachment keeps you stuck. Connection helps you grow. Attachment asks you to shrink yourself to maintain the bond. Connection invites you to expand because of it. This distinction becomes impossible to ignore once solitude clears your emotional landscape. One of the first signs of emotional attachment is that it feels heavy. You constantly worry about losing the person. You feel pressure to be perfect so they won't leave. You silence your needs to avoid conflict. You tolerate behaviors that don't align with your values. You feel exhausted after interacting with them, but you convince yourself it's normal. Attachment thrives on insecurity. It makes you believe that the other person completes you, and without them, you will collapse. But solitude breaks that illusion. When you walk alone long enough, you experience what it feels like to stand without anyone holding you up. You realize that you can survive heartbreak, rebuild after loss, and find peace without external comfort. This realization does not make you cold, it makes you free. You understand that love should never require abandoning yourself. That connection should never require sacrificing your boundaries. That relationships should not demand your wholeness in exchange for temporary emotional relief. As this inner strength grows, your understanding of connection evolves entirely. Real connection begins to feel different, lighter, calmer, deeper. It does not create anxiety, it creates trust. It does not require chasing, it grows naturally. It does not drain your energy, it nourishes it. It does not confuse you, it clarifies you. Real connection does not depend on constant communication or emotional intensity. Instead, it flows with effortlessness, understanding, mutual respect, and presence. It feels like alignment, not fear. Solitude sharpens your ability to sense this difference instantly. Where you once ignored red flags, you now see them clearly. Where you once romanticized toxicity, you now recognize it as emotional hunger. Where you once mistook intensity for passion, you now understand that peace is the true indicator of love. You stop being drawn to people who trigger your wounds and start being drawn to people who support your healing. You stop trying to fix relationships that drain you and start investing in relationships that nourish your growth. Walking alone also teaches you how to love without clinging, without needing someone to fill your emptiness, without losing yourself in the process, without trying to force something that is not aligned. When you are comfortable with solitude, You no longer enter relationships out of fear, you enter them out of abundance. You can love someone deeply without depending on them for identity. You can care for someone without attaching your worth to their presence. You can walk with someone without losing your own path. You can let someone in without giving them the power to destroy your peace. This kind of love is rare because it requires a healed inner world, and solitude is the environment where this healing takes place. When you walk alone, you learn how to meet your own emotional needs. You learn how to soothe your own fears. You learn how to comfort your own heart. You learn how to validate yourself without needing external reassurance. You learn how to process emotions without projecting them onto others. You learn how to recognize your triggers without blaming anyone else. This emotional maturity becomes the foundation for every relationship you build afterward. Another profound transformation happens. Your standards rise naturally, not because you become picky or demanding, but because you finally understand what your soul needs to thrive. You stop settling for half-love because you now know what real peace feels like. You stop entertaining inconsistent people because you now know the value of stability. You stop tolerating emotional manipulation because you now know your own worth. You stop staying in situations that break your spirit because you have learned to protect your inner world with wisdom. Solitude makes your energy so grounded and self-respecting that misaligned people no longer gravitate toward you. They feel your boundaries before you even speak them. Meanwhile, the right people recognize your authenticity and feel drawn to your presence. You begin attracting individuals who value your peace, match your effort, respect your boundaries, and love you in a way that feels safe and expansive. You attract people who don't just want your time, they want your well-being. People who don't just walk beside you, they walk with you. But perhaps the greatest gift solitude gives you is this. You learn to walk away the moment a relationship asks you to betray yourself. You recognize when something feels wrong, even if it looks right. You trust your intuition more than your attachment. You stop mistaking loneliness for connection. You stop mistaking emotional intensity for compatibility. You stop mistaking temporary comfort for genuine support. And then something extraordinary happens. Your heart becomes clear. Clear of illusions, clear of neediness, clear of fear-based attachments, clear of emotional confusion, clear of the wounds that once dictated your choices. Your heart becomes free enough to love without losing itself, and wise enough to choose only what aligns with your soul. This clarity transforms every relationship in your life. You begin forming connections based on honesty, emotional maturity, shared values, mutual growth, and real resonance. You stop building relationships based on trauma bonding, convenience, or fear. You stop returning to relationships you've outgrown. You stop ignoring your boundaries. You stop silencing your needs. You stop betraying your inner truth for temporary affection. You finally understand that the right people do not require you to abandon yourself. The right love does not damage your peace. The right friendships do not make you feel small. The right connections do not drain your soul. And solitude teaches you to never again settle for anything less. By the time solitude has finished teaching you this lesson, your entire relationship with love, connection, people, and intimacy transforms. You love differently. You choose differently. You communicate differently. You value differently. You walk away differently. You heal differently. You trust differently. You show up differently. You exist differently. Most importantly, you finally understand the truth. Real connection begins with the connection you build with yourself. Everything that comes after is simply a reflection of that inner relationship. 14. Solitude rebuilds your inner peace and teaches you how to protect it for the rest of your life. There comes a point in your journey of walking alone where you suddenly realize how fragile your inner peace used to be. You begin to see how easily it was shaken by people's moods, how quickly it was disturbed by other people's drama, how often it was broken by expectations you carried on your shoulders, and how silently it was stolen by environments you thought you needed to survive. Before solitude entered your life, your peace depended on circumstances being perfect. A moment of criticism could ruin your day. A small disagreement could occupy your mind for hours. The fear of being judged, misunderstood, or left behind affected your sleep, your emotions, and your decisions. But solitude changes all of this. It transforms your peace from something that can be taken away into something that exists from within you, something that becomes unbreakable, something that belongs only to you. Most people never discover inner peace because they never give themselves the space to access it. They spend their lives reacting to the world instead of responding from the self. They attach their emotional stability to external outcomes, the success of their relationships, the approval of others, the presence of company, the comfort of familiarity. When these external factors change, their peace collapses. They go through life emotionally fragile, easily triggered, constantly overwhelmed, and unable to differentiate their feelings from the noise around them. But when you walk alone, when you detach from the noise, when you stop seeking constant company and begin spending real time with yourself, something profound begins to shift inside you. You begin to notice the subtle ways your peace was once polluted. You begin to understand how much tension you carried in your spirit. You realize how many moments of discomfort you ignored just to maintain harmony with others. You see how much energy you spent managing people's emotions, solving their problems, absorbing their chaos, and carrying their burdens on your back. Walking alone forces you to confront these truths, and in that confrontation, you begin the slow, sacred process of rebuilding your peace from the inside out. The first stage of this rebuilding is detoxing an emotional, mental, and spiritual purification that happens naturally when you are removed from environments that drain you. Without even trying, you begin releasing emotional residue you didn't know you were carrying. Your mind stops racing as much. Your emotions stop swinging unpredictably. Your heart stops feeling heavy. You begin sleeping better. You find pockets of calmness in your day where anxiety once lived. You feel yourself softening, loosening, breathing again. This detox is not always comfortable. In the beginning, your peace feels unfamiliar because you are used to chaos. Silence feels strange because you grew accustomed to noise. Stillness feels foreign because your mind was always overstimulated. But slowly, silence becomes comforting. Stillness becomes natural. Calmness becomes your new rhythm. Your nervous system begins to recalibrate. Your thoughts begin to settle, and your inner world begins to stabilize. As solitude deepens, you enter the second stage of rebuilding peace, awareness. This is where you start noticing the real causes of your past emotional instability. You begin recognizing the exact moments your peace used to break. You realize how often you allowed small things to affect your entire mood. You see how easily you internalized people's opinions. You notice how frequently you allowed your environment to dictate your emotions. This awareness brings light to the places that were once dark. You begin to understand which patterns were rooted in trauma, which habits were inherited, which responses were conditioned, and which fears were never truly yours. With this awareness comes the third stage, understanding. You start seeing what truly threatens your peace. You realize it was never loneliness that broke you, it was the wrong company. It was never solitude that hurt you, it was the emotional noise of people who did not understand you. It was never your emotions that overwhelmed you, it was the environments that triggered them. It was never your heart that was weak, it was the boundaries you never set. In this understanding, you stop blaming yourself for the past. You stop calling yourself too sensitive, too emotional, too insecure, or too reactive. You realize you were simply absorbing energy that didn't belong to you. You were living in environments that were never aligned with your spirit. You were tolerating relationships that did not honor your boundaries. You were giving from a cup that was never refilled. Solitude helps you see all of this without judgment. And in that clarity, your peace finds its root. The fourth stage is reconstruction, where solitude teaches you how to create a new foundation for peace, one that is internal, stable, and unshakable. You begin forming new habits that nourish your mental clarity. You create boundaries that protect your emotional energy. You learn to regulate your reactions instead of letting external triggers control you. You choose your environments consciously. You begin to listen to your body's signals, and you begin to say no without guilt, because you now understand that your peace is not something you can sacrifice for temporary harmony. You start to recognize the value of quiet moments. You start appreciating your own presence. You begin honoring your emotional needs. You begin embracing the power of saying less. You begin noticing the beauty in simplicity. You begin building a relationship with yourself that is grounded in self-respect and gentle discipline. Peace becomes less of a goal and more of a lifestyle. And then, something extraordinary happens. You stop allowing anything outside of you to disturb what is inside of you. This does not mean you avoid life. It means you navigate it with wisdom. You stop reacting impulsively because your inner world is rooted in awareness. You stop absorbing other people's emotions because you now understand the difference between what is yours and what is not. You stop letting negativity enter your spirit because you now guard your energy with intention. You stop engaging in drama because your peace is too valuable to gamble with. Your mind becomes clearer. Your heart becomes softer yet stronger. Your emotions become more balanced. Your decisions become more grounded. Your presence becomes calm and steady. Your aura becomes peaceful and magnetic. People begin to notice it. They see it in how you speak slowly, thoughtfully, without unnecessary emotion. They see it in how you react, not with defensiveness, but with clarity. They see it in how you move with intention instead of urgency. They see it in your energy, quiet, powerful, self-contained. However, there is another depth to this transformation, one most people never reach. As solitude continues rebuilding your peace, you enter the fifth stage, protection. This is where you learn how to maintain peace, even in environments that once disturbed you. You develop spiritual boundaries. You begin filtering what enters your mind, heart, and spirit. You become discerning about who you let close. You stop oversharing. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop fighting battles that do not belong to you. You stop trying to fix people who aren't ready to change. You stop letting guilt manipulate your choices. You begin to understand that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Not every voice deserves to influence your thinking. Not every emotion needs your attention. Not every invitation deserves your presence. Not every connection deserves your heart. This protection is not avoidance, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that peace is not something you find outside. It is something you cultivate within. And if you do not protect it, the world will take it from you without hesitation. The sixth stage of peace building is alignment. This is where your life begins to mirror your inner state. You start attracting peaceful people, peaceful environments, peaceful conversations, and peaceful opportunities. You stop being pulled into chaos because your spirit no longer resonates with it. You stop repeating old patterns because you now see through them. You stop accepting less than you deserve because you now recognize your worth. Your life becomes more intentional, more meaningful, and more aligned with your truth. And then comes the final stage, embodiment. This is where peace becomes who you are, not something you practice, not something you chase, not something you hope for, but something you embody. Peace becomes the atmosphere around you. It becomes the tone of your voice. It becomes the expression on your face. It becomes the energy you carry into every room. It becomes the way you make decisions. It becomes the filter through which you see the world. People may try to provoke you, but you remain steady. People may misunderstand you, but you remain clear. People may leave you, but you remain whole. People may doubt you, but you remain certain. This is what solitude builds within you. This is the kind of peace that nothing can break. Not loneliness, not rejection, not change, not uncertainty, not hardship, not disappointment. This inner peace becomes your greatest source of strength, your greatest protection, and your greatest superpower. Because once you learn how to create peace within yourself, you will never again look for it in someone else. 15. Solitude gives you the power to create yourself from zero, free from the expectations, labels, and limitations the world placed on you. There is a moment in your journey through solitude when you realize something incredibly powerful. You have spent most of your life becoming a version of yourself that was shaped by the world, not by your truth. You were shaped by your childhood environment, by people's expectations, by society's scripts, by culture's demands, by family traditions, by the fears you inherited, and by the limitations others placed on you. You were shaped by survival, not by intention, by adaptation, not by authenticity, by pressure, not by your personal truth. And because of this, most people never become who they truly are. They only become what life forced them to be. But solitude changes this. When you walk alone long enough, you begin shedding the identities that never belonged to you. You begin letting go of the roles you played only because they felt safe. You begin questioning the beliefs you carried simply because they were given to you. And for the first time in your life, you stand in front of yourself without the noise of external influence, without the weight of expectations, without the pressure to perform, and without the need to be understood. It is in this quiet, sacred space that the real journey begins, the journey of creating yourself from zero. This does not mean becoming a new person forcefully. It means discovering the person who has always been buried underneath layers of noise, pain, conditioning, and self-protection. Solitude becomes the environment where this excavation happens. When the world falls silent, your soul begins to speak. When distractions fade, your inner truth rises. When attachments melt away, your essence emerges. This emergence is not sudden, it is gradual, like dawn breaking through a long night. It is gentle, honest, and incredibly liberating. At first, this process feels unfamiliar. When you are no longer performing for others, you wonder who you truly are. When you are no longer attached to certain environments, you question where you truly belong. When you are no longer influenced by people's opinions, you ask yourself what you truly want. These questions may feel unsettling, but they are the beginning of rebirth, the beginning of self-creation, the beginning of meeting the real you. The first thing solitude reveals is how much of your personality was a survival mechanism. You acted strong because life demanded it. You acted quiet because someone silenced you. You acted confident because you were told to hide your insecurity. You acted agreeable because conflict frightened you. You acted detached because vulnerability once brought pain. You acted responsible because you never wanted to disappoint. You acted independent because no one showed you safety. You acted perfect because you feared rejection. You acted fine because emotions were never welcomed. All of these behaviors were not your true nature. They were responses to your environment. They were masks you wore to protect yourself. Solitude helps you recognize them clearly and compassionately, without judgment. And once you understand them, you begin peeling them away one by one, like shedding old skin. This shedding is not easy. The old self tries to cling on because it was built for protection. It whispers things like, "Don't change, don't risk, don't show your truth, don't step forward, don't trust yourself." That voice is not your enemy. It is your old identity trying to keep you safe based on outdated fear. But solitude gives you the clarity to respond with wisdom. I am no longer who I used to be, and I no longer live in the past. With this awareness, the old layers slowly fall away. As you shed these layers, you enter the second stage of self-creation, rediscovery. This stage is magical because you begin reconnecting with parts of yourself you abandoned long ago. You remember your childhood dreams. You rediscover your forgotten passions. You reconnect with your natural personality, your humor, your creativity, your depth, your softness, your curiosity, your intensity, your sensitivity, all the things that once defined you before the world told you to be something else. You start asking yourself questions you never had the space to ask. Who am I without the roles I play? What do I genuinely care about? What lifestyle actually nourishes me? What boundaries do I need to thrive? What relationships feel aligned with my soul? What kind of person do I want to become? What truth have I been ignoring? What version of me feels most authentic? These questions are not philosophical, they are transformative. They guide you back to your true self, the self that existed before you were shaped by external forces. Solitude gives you the space to explore these questions with honesty and depth. As you continue walking alone, you enter the third stage, reinvention. This is where you begin building a new identity intentionally, consciously, and authentically, not based on expectations, not based on fear, not based on survival, but based on truth. You begin choosing qualities you want to nurture. You begin adopting habits that support your growth. You begin creating routines that align with your peace. You begin making decisions that reflect your values. You begin forming boundaries that honor your emotional energy. You begin letting go of identities that no longer serve your evolution. This reinvention is not superficial. It is soul deep. You begin thinking differently, feeling differently, living differently. You begin seeing the world through a clearer lens. You begin trusting yourself more. You begin speaking with more certainty. You begin moving with more intention. You begin loving with more wisdom. You begin existing with more authenticity. One of the most powerful changes solitude brings is the realization that you do not need to become a better version of who you were. You are becoming a truer version of who you are. You are not improving yourself. You are revealing your truth. You are not adding to yourself. You are removing everything that wasn't truly you. Then comes the fourth stage, alignment. In this stage, your inner world finally matches your outer world. Your relationships reflect your growth. Your environment reflects your peace. Your decisions reflect your values. Your path reflects your purpose. You stop living accidentally and start living intentionally. You stop settling for what is familiar and start choosing what is aligned. You stop allowing life to happen to you and start shaping your life consciously. You begin expressing yourself without fear. You begin pursuing what inspires you. You begin surrounding yourself with people who nourish you. You begin choosing experiences that elevate you. You begin respecting your own journey. This alignment creates a shift in your energy so powerful that people who once misunderstood you now admire you. People who once doubted you now respect you. People who once overshadowed you now cannot influence you. People who once drained you no longer have access to you. You no longer shrink or hide. Your presence becomes stronger, calmer, and more grounded. But the deepest transformation happens in the fifth stage, embodiment. This is where your new identity is no longer something you are trying to live. It becomes who you are. You no longer force confidence. You embody it. You no longer fake peace. You radiate it. You no longer perform strength. You live it. You no longer chase love. You attract it. You no longer search for meaning. You walk with purpose. You no longer beg for belonging. You belong to yourself. At this stage, you understand one of the greatest spiritual truths. Solitude did not change you, it revealed you. It did not break you, it freed you. It did not empty you, It cleansed you. It did not isolate you. It returned you to yourself. You finally realize you were never lost. You were only buried. You were never incomplete. You were only distracted. You were never weak. You were only overwhelmed. You were never unworthy. You were only surrounded by people who couldn't see your worth. You were never broken. You were only covered in wounds that were not yours. Solitude helped you peel back every layer to reveal a version of you that is whole, grounded, wise, powerful, and deeply aligned with truth. A version of you who doesn't fear being alone because you now understand this simple, life-changing reality. When you know how to create yourself, you never again fear losing anyone or anything, because you now carry the power to rebuild your life, not based on who others want you to be, but based on who you truly are. When you reach the end of this journey after walking through solitude, after peeling away old identities, after letting go of people who no longer aligned, after confronting your fears, after rebuilding your peace, after rediscovering your truth, something profound and irreversible happens inside you. You realize that solitude was never punishment. It was preparation. Every moment you walked alone was shaping you, strengthening you, stripping away illusions, and guiding you back to the person you were always meant to become. You begin to see that the silence you once feared has become the space where your spirit breathes. You understand that the emptiness you once ran from has become the foundation of your inner power. You recognize that the loneliness you once hated has transformed into a sanctuary of truth, clarity, and wholeness. You look back at your old self not with regret, not with shame, not with sadness, but with compassion. You realize that version of you was doing the best they could, with the limited awareness they had, surrounded by noise they didn't know how to shut out, shaped by expectations they didn't know how to question, held down by fears they didn't know how to release. But solitude taught you. It taught you what no one else ever could. It taught you how to listen to your own voice, how to trust your own judgment, how to protect your own peace, how to release what is not aligned, how to choose yourself without guilt, how to rebuild yourself without fear, and how to rise into the fullness of your potential without needing permission from anyone. You learned that you cannot heal in the same place you were breaking. You learned that not everyone who walks with you deserves to walk within you. You learned that peace is not found in people, it is found in boundaries. You learned that love is not something you chase, it is something you recognize when it aligns. You learned that your worth is not negotiable. You learned that your purpose is not tied to anyone's approval. You learned that your path is sacred, even when others do not understand it. And slowly, without even noticing it, you became someone new, stronger but softer, wiser but humbler, peaceful but powerful, detached but deeply loving, grounded but limitless. You became someone who does not break in silence, but transforms in it. Someone who does not fear walking alone, because you now understand that walking alone is how you realign with destiny. Someone who does not tolerate what disrupts your inner world, because you now know that nothing is worth losing your peace. Someone who knows that your energy is your responsibility, your healing is your gift, and your relationship with yourself is the foundation of your entire life. Solitude gave you the rarest treasure, the ability to feel complete within yourself. Not complete because you have everything, but complete because you finally understood you were never lacking anything. Not complete because life is perfect, but complete because you no longer depend on the external to feel whole internally. Not complete because you are alone, but complete because you know you could walk alone forever and still rise. You no longer need constant company. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You no longer chase validation. You no longer cling to people who drain you. You no longer settle for situations that suffocate you. You no longer shrink to make others comfortable. You no longer abandon yourself to be chosen. Instead, you choose yourself. You honor your truth. You protect your energy. You walk with intention. You live with awareness. You love with wisdom. You speak with clarity. You move with purpose. And this is the final truth. Solitude has been preparing you to understand all along. When you become whole within yourself, you stop needing the world to complete you. You stop begging for love because you are love. You stop chasing acceptance because you accept yourself. You stop fearing loss because you know you can always recreate your life. You stop seeking direction because you trust your inner guidance. You stop holding on to the past because you now walk aligned with the future. You stop looking outward to feel alive because your soul is finally awake. This is the transformation solitude gives those brave enough to embrace it. It gives you back to yourself. It returns you to your essence. It reveals your truest identity. It aligns you with your purpose. It frees you from everything you once thought you needed. And it prepares you for a life where peace is your default, clarity is your compass, strength is your foundation, and authenticity is your path. You end this journey not as the person who started it, not as the person the world tried to shape, not as the person you thought you had to be, but as the person you were always meant to become. Whole, aware, grounded, untouchable, complete. You walked alone, and in doing so, you finally came home.